The ANC's Treasurer General Paul Mashatile engaging in a Q&A session, just clarifying a number of issues. So let's just deal with what we have heard throughout the course of the past, 30 minutes or so, following the ANC's NEC meeting this weekend. We are joined by Professor Dirk Kotze, I beg your pardon, Professor of Political Sciences at the University of South Africa. Prof, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. So we'll deal with the Litsima campaign, I guess, a little bit later on. But perhaps let's take a look at the step-aside resolution, the NEC deciding that when a member steps aside voluntarily, they should not avail themselves to be elected to protect what the Treasurer General says is the integrity of the organization. However, once a year, there will be a review for someone who steps aside, and at any point, I guess.
Yes, that is so, and that is something which will have very serious consequences because it affects very high-profile persons, starting with Asma Gashule, who didn't step aside but was suspended, and that, in a sense, is in the same category. And then also the newly elected chairperson of the eThekwini region. What they didn't say is whether it will work retrogressively, whether therefore she will, for example, will have to vacate that seat or not. I take it that it is for everything that happens from now on into the future. This arrangement within the guidelines will definitely apply. But it is something which I think will have quite a lot of consequences. We have already seen that some members are saying, who are directly affected by it, that they don't want to accept it. And I guess it's not absolutely impossible that it will ultimately go to the courts.
And this process still has to go through hoops, as it has to go to branches, as you speak of the future.
Yes, although this has now been accepted by the NEC, and the NEC is the highest decision-making body, so their decision most possibly cannot really be challenged by the branches. So I guess in that respect, it is maybe a form of informing the branches rather than trying to get their approval for this.
On the revelation that the ANC Women's League NEC will be disbanded and replaced with a task team, your thought on that before we deal with Ms. Batabile Dlamini?
Well, this is following what has happened in several other places, both provinces, like, for example, the Free State or the Western Cape and Northwest also, as well as the Youth League. So it's not therefore really an exceptional case, but I think what is different here is that there's no indication that the Women's League is dysfunctional, that they don't function at the grassroots level. It therefore more affects the National Executive Committee, and that is what is really being disbanded now and replaced by, or will be replaced by a task team.
And the NEC not dealing with the issue of Ms. Batabile Dlamini that should be dealt with by officials of the party, and that she will present herself to the Integrity Commission of the party.
Yes, I think in her case it is something which is it's a very sensitive matter because the Women's League is playing a very important role in terms of national conferences, and I think no one wants to alienate them from their campaigns also. So that's definitely an internal ANC matter. At the same time, the fact that the president, Batabile Dlamini, has been found guilty, and which is more than what, for example, the step-aside rule is referring to, and that she's now going to the Integrity Commission, is actually, I think, less than what is normally expected, and that is a person who is found guilty by a court of law must resign from his or her position. So I think this is again an indication that this is dealt with differently from most of the other situations which can be compared with this. But again, it is about the fact that the Women's League is regarded as quite an exceptional case because of its prominence and the impact that it has on the internal politics of the ANC.
Prof, the NEC is not done with the step-aside rule, right? So officials should continue to look at the documents if there could be areas of improvement. What do you perceive, at least, those areas of improvement could be?
Well, one I've mentioned now already, and that is to what extent it can apply to elections that have taken place earlier on already, like in Mpumalanga, where the treasurer, the provincial treasurer, is affected by it. In the case of the regions like eThekwini in KwaZulu-Natal, where two persons have been affected by it. So really, that is an aspect that I think still sort of expects to be looked at. Then also, for how long will it exist or will it be implemented? Because court cases can take for years. And I think many people will argue that this, in a sense, takes away some of the inherent rights, membership rights of an organization like the ANC. And many people will therefore challenge that. So the idea, originally the document or the guideline said it must be reviewed every 6 months. Now we've heard today it will now be reviewed every year, means that it is longer term perspectives that's been introduced here. So I guess this is something that will have to be revisited also. For how long and under which conditions can this be implemented? Because it can effectively mean the end of the political career of some persons. Take someone like Magashule. Will this now mean that he will not be able to stand in any position at the national conference in December this year? This must have very serious implications for him and other persons in similar positions who want to stand, for example, for the NEC or even some positions in the top 6. So these matters, I think, will have to be stated much more explicitly.
Prof, with that, 2 members of the National Dispute Resolution Committee have been replaced. Overall, the tone of this weekend's meeting, what does it tell you in terms of the party's commitment to renewal?
Yes, I think in this particular case with these 2 members is that they are involved in a very prominent subcommittee of the NEC, and that's the organizing committee. And that there's a feeling that they might become, that there's a potential that they can become one of the parties in some of the disputes, because it's about elections and it's about also the national conference and other matters that's the responsibility of this committee. So I think what they try to do is to try to minimize as much as possible internal disputes or conflicts of interest within the top structure of the ANC. But at the same time, one cannot sort of left it by not sort of observing it that both of these members who have now been removed from the National Dispute Resolution Committee are both persons quite known to be supporters of President Zuma or the so-called RET group. So some would say there's certainly some political aspects also involved in this position. But it will be interesting to see who's ultimately going to take over as chairperson of the National Dispute Resolution Committee, because it has always been Jessie Duarte in her position as the Deputy Secretary General, and she's now for many months now already ill and therefore cannot do that.
Very quickly for us, Prof, please, if you will, with all that has been said and done, is this enough to reconnect the party with the people, as we heard from the Treasurer General under the Litsima campaign?
No, I don't think these are simply decisions. They are not yet actions. And what the South African public in general is now asking for is not any more promises or statements or commitments, but it is that they want to see the results. And I think before that doesn't happen, it won't change much. So it is really in the hands of the ANC on the ground now. For example, in the case of KwaZulu-Natal, where after the floods, but in other parts of the country also, because he's very much talking, Paul Mashatile now was talking about what happens in communities with respect to access to water or electricity or other sort of social infrastructure. And that's the big issues that must be changed. So it means it's about what happens in local authorities, what's done by local councillors, and how they become closer or more connected to their local communities.
Professor Dirk Kotze is the Professor of Political Sciences at the University of South Africa. Thank you, as always, for availing yourself.